We're going to be looking at the reintroduction of history as a subject into our education in Nigeria, particularly the secondary education. Sometime in 2009, that's about 10 years ago, the federal government told us that history as a subject will no longer be, a subject that students will be allowed to study, simply because of the fact that there were no teachers to teach the subject, and of course there were no methodology that could really interest students to want to learn this subject. But sometime in March this year, we're also told that the federal government, through the former Minister of Education, is trying to reintroduce history as a subject into our education curriculum in the secondary school. So what are the issues? What happened then that is no more happening now that history has been reintroduced? All these are things that we're going to be talking about on this segment this morning on ITV. And of course, I have two guests here. Peter Okungbawa is an educationist. You're welcome to this program this morning on ITV.
Thank you, Evans.
Yeah, and I also have Pastor Logat Sado, who is a lecturer with the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and I think by extension that is also history too. Am I correct?
Exactly, no, not exactly.
All right.
But it takes history into account.
All right, you're welcome to this program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Evans.
All right. Now, gentlemen, let's look at history. What is in history, as a field of study that we think that Nigeria as a nation probably needs now? I'll start with you, Peter Okungbawa.
Thank you for that question. I've often argued that history should not be seen as an intellectual enterprise or an intellectual discourse. History, in my understanding, should be seen as a tool for reinventing and inventing. There is no nation in the world today that doesn't put into account its histories while projecting its future and addressing the challenges of its presence. I do recall that while we were in school, we were taught the importance of history, and it meant that it goes beyond the stereotype definition of the study of the issues of the past, as it may suggest literally. But going forward, it actually meant that it's a holistic understanding of the norms, values, and the practice of a people. And these norms and values of a people should be put into account in shaping the future. There were historical practices that were right in the 19th century that are today not tenable by reason of civility. Those kind of issues should be addressed and conform with modern day practice. If you leave a people's history behind, you have dispossessed them of an identity. You have dispossessed them of a purpose and a goal. So at the time when history became a subject that wasn't so common in our learning system anymore, we saw the problems it could create. If I knew historically much about the brothers I have in the northern Nigeria, very well informed about them and their way of life, and their value system, when I'm handling their issue, I'm well equipped. If they are handling my issue, they are well equipped. So history, for me, there is a technological angle to history. The technological angle to history, it's what it would do. Somebody wrote a thesis some time ago and said the role of history in the sustenance of Nigeria's nascent democracy. There is a place for that history to come in. Because if you observe, the parents in their mid-40s, late 40s, early 30s and mid-30s don't know the history of this country. Because right from when they got the ideal of schooling in that time, this subject has become scarce now. And I wouldn't want to look at the excuse that the federal government adduced in 2009 yeah, as the lack of teaching force and whatever being the reason why they skewed off. We have history departments in virtually all our learning institutions. We have history departments in University of Benin. In recent time, I've been talking on the radio on Manhattan on the benefit and importance of history of a people. My child will be 5 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, and he knows nothing about Nigeria.
Okay, now let me come to Pastor Logat Sado. Now, Nigeria as a country, we have various issues, plethora of issues right now, economical issues, security issues, just like what we discussed a while ago. Now, do you think going back to reintroduce history as a field of study in our secondary schools, even down below that, maybe in the primary or in the kindergarten education level, can we really begin to get some of our problems right?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Evans. The truth be told here that when a people are denied access to their past, they will have a very serious challenge in identifying their present and be able to discuss what their future will look like.
True.
So the history of a people actually will determine who they are, and what they can be. Now, when you deny them access to information about their past, you are invariably telling them that they never existed,
yeah,
and that they were just offshoots of a particular decision or an outcome. And so it's like saying that the group of people could best be described as, in quote, bastards, without fathers and without mothers. The term history is a Greek word, you know, and it has the same root word with story. Okay. It's actually historia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in Africa, in Nigeria in particular, we tend to mix history and story together.
Wow.
Stories are good narratives, and sometimes they are fiction in nature. The way you present a story may be true, may not be true, but they sound nice. For instance, in Africa, we have lots of folk laws and folk tales, like the story of the elephant, why the elephant's trunk became long, went to drink water by the poolside, and the crocodile grabbed the nose, and in trying to escape, the nose was stretched. That's how the trunk became long. Those are stories, but those are not histories.
Okay.
Histories are well-documented information, facts about a people that determines, that explains, that describes and prescribes everything about their identity, their origin, their formation, their contacts and connections, their present situations, and what they can become as a result of their past. So reintroducing history in Nigeria will have a lot of advantages, not just for the young people, but including the adults. For instance, I share in the opinion that there is a knowledge gap in Nigeria. And think about it. When we celebrated June 12th the last time, for the first time in Nigeria, many young people in their 20s were asking, what is June 12th? Who is MK Abiola? Why are we celebrating June 12th? And I was taken aback. The reason is not far-fetched. It is because we removed history from our curriculum. Yeah. Not just the young people. Adults too, who should know something about Nigerians, like he said, those in their 40s, early 40s and late 30s are not aware, and they are the parents of today. What will they teach their children? For instance, every other story we know about Nigeria have been stories of war, and that's why I need to stress this difference between history and story. We talk about stories of how the Beninese conquered XYZ, how this ethnic group conquered. It's been stories of war, intertribal war, inter-ethnic war. These are not the things we need in our history. They are there, but you see, we should talk about the technological advancement. How did we develop the bronze industry in Benin, the brass industry in Benin, the wood industry in Benin? Let's talk about it. Where are we now? And where can we be? For instance, in the 13th century, when people from Amsterdam visited Benin, and they were amazed that the city they saw was not an ordinary city. In fact, they used to think that Benin was a primitive environment. Yeah. But when they came, they said that the cities in Benin, the roads in Benin were wider than the roads in Amsterdam. And they wondered, how could these people achieve this? They had street lights, but the street lights were not powered by hydro or by solar. Lamps. They were powered by lamps. Yeah. And that means that there was no nightlife in Benin. I mean, there was nightlife in Benin.
So the idea of street lights
did not come from the West.
It's historical.
It's historical. The Beninese had history.
Like ramification and imbalance.
They had it. We could build story buildings with our mud houses. Yeah. We could develop our iron. How did we develop this technology? These are the things that we should start talking about. So going forward, in developing the curriculum for history, we should jettison or play down on the wars
aspects of it.
And that's why we have become so inclined to wars and battles. Let's talk more about the ingenuity of the people, the achievements of the people across ethnic divides. What was it that the Hausas achieved? What was it that the Igbos achieved? And some of all of these will help us develop an identity that will encourage the present young people to understand that, look, development as it were started in Nigeria a long time ago, and that we lost track, maybe because of colonialism or some other factors, but we can retrace these tracks. And then with the knowledge of modernization that we have, with the knowledge of internet and technology that we have, we can take up our history from where we left it and pick it up again and chart a new course for our society.
Okay, Peter Okumbawa, most times the problem has to do with sustainability, how to really sustain a policy that is being reintroduced, or an idea that is being reintroduced, like what we're talking about now. Because just like what I said, in 2009, when the federal government expunged history out of education curriculum, most Nigerians were bewildered. So their greatest bewilderment that, how come? Now, the excuse was that, oh, this subject was taught in a way that was not interesting to students. And of course, we didn't have that, the government did not have enough qualified teachers to teach. Now, the government has still not told us now whether they have enough qualified teachers now. And of course, now they are telling us that they are reintroducing it. Now, the issue of sustainability. So how do you think, with this new reintroduction now, how can it be sustained? How can history really be sustained so that students can really find it as an interesting field of study?
Thank you. Nigerians have themselves begun to provide energy for themselves, solar panels, generators, because they know its importance. The first way to talk about sustaining the learning of history or the teaching of history in our school system is to understand the importance of history. For me, history is as important as mathematics when it comes to shaping the future and reconstructing a future from the past. Not to realize the importance of history, it simply would mean that the policy is just a hula baloo. But at the private level, I would encourage those in government, at the local level, school owners, to begin to key into the importance of history. The iron works, as it were, begun with the nooks. People will often say a strong leather is called a Moroccan leather. We grew up knowing that Morocco leather was a strong leather. But the pages of history taught me that the Morocco leather, so-called, is Nigerian leather.
That's hides and skin.
Hides and skin.
Yeah.
It went to Morocco through Agadas and came back refined to us.
And known as Morocco leather.
And now become known as Morocco leather. Now, that's the economic skill of history. Now, I also understand that what you call Hausa Kola is in fact planted by the Yorubas. But the Hausas became more of the merchants of these. Liberia was nicknamed the Salt and Pepper Coast because historically, much of the salt and pepper that were traded on in these coastal lines were gotten from Liberia. Again, the Benin Kingdom was known as the slave coast because majority of the slaves, Nigeria, was gotten from, the majority of the slaves that went to the west were gotten from Nigeria. To the extent we had the largest slave market in Bonny. All of this. I one time met a child who was from America, and the child was quoting the constitution of their country to me, telling me about the Bill of Rights and what have you. These constitutions, treaties, conferences, and agreements and truths are all sources of history. And they have a role to play in the construct of their constitution. One of the minor sources of history in this country, as we were told, are things that should have become major sources. The agreements we reached, the treaties we had, the truths we had. Of course, we know the place of oral tradition, archaeology, written records of the Arab and the Europeans, as it were. But in what way are these documentations shaping us as a people? I very much loved what Mr. Lugard said. And I want to say that in sustaining history as a discourse, we shouldn't just see it like something for an academic enterprise. That is why, for me, from primary school, the learning of history should start. It will help us as a people to understand the idiosyncratic values about us and about other people, and how to respect boundaries and respect people for what they are and who they are. For you to know who people are, you have to put into account their history. You cannot know people and engage them without a knowledge of their history. Many centuries ago, Charles Seligman did opine about the African continent that because of the lack of initial idea of reading and writing, when he came to Africa, all he saw was darkness, and darkness was not a subject in history. That was an attempt to dispossess us of an existence, like we never existed. But you know the funny thing, that was pre-colonial era, and today we have become our own colonial masters by not reminding ourselves of this past to construct a future. The importance of history is as important as the teaching of English language, because when it comes to communication, we might have accepted English language as a lingua franca. We probably could have been speaking Bini if Bini language was imposed on the areas that were conquered in the historical times. So why we take English language is important, because we need it in our daily affair. Okay. So when we know we need history as much as we need this English language and mathematics, sustaining it will not be a problem.
Okay. Now, look at. I think perhaps we may also begin to change our perception, towards history. I remember those days in Uniben. Of course, we have the Shishi department, that's the Student Historical Society of Nigeria and all that. Now, for some of my colleagues then in that department, they didn't really feel too good. They didn't really feel too okay with that course. It was something that they did not actually want to study, but they found themselves there.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm trying to say is that the importance of history as a field of study can really not be overemphasized. I mean, a historian can work anywhere. You have a financial historian. If you're trying to look at the origin of language, you can have a historian, linguists. As a matter of fact, in my own field of study, it was through history that we got to know that the human language that you and I speak today actually originated from the Phrygian language. That is on that part. So how do we begin to try to change our mindset towards history as a field of study? I mean, as individuals in the country.
Thank you very much. I think that the first thing we need to understand is that people who are of significant positions in Nigeria, political office holders, academicians, should be very mindful of their choice of words. I say this with every sense of responsibility. You recall in the past, about 9-10 years ago, one political leader made a remark that certain courses and subjects should be eradicated from our school system. And ignorantly, the person mentioned history, mentioned sociology, mentioned anthropology, and said that going forward, Nigerians should study courses like engineering, study courses like medicine, and that's the way to go. Unfortunately, what that individual didn't understand, and those who aligned with such thoughts, was that in America today, before you ever think of achieving anything, you must go through history. In fact, they take history so much that they are not only interested in studying the history of Americans, they study history of Africans, they study history of Asians, they study history of every other part of the world so that they can engage them adequately. Now, back to the point here. I know that because over the years, the term history as a course or subject has been bastardized, people do not want to identify with it, and so they are repackaging it. And so it's not uncommon now to hear that I'm in the Department of International Studies and Diplomacy, I'm in the Department of International Relations, I'm in the Department of this. The point here is that they are studying history.
Yeah.
And so maybe I would suggest that we should encourage the repackaging. Yes, because I mean, you sell the same thing, but you are just rebottling it or repackaging it. So we encourage the organization, I mean, the educational institutions, the government, the Ministry of Education, let them find a way out to repackage the subject. But more importantly, I noted something. And I think that that's one of the problems we have in this part of the country. Most of our history subjects at the secondary school level in those days were actually stories. There is need for systematic engagement of the concept of history as a subject, academic in nature, informative in nature, and of course, predictive in nature, such that our history will not just be a tool in helping us know who we were, but they can help us advance as to what we want to be. For instance, was it not in 2014, we were now being told that there was an agreement about Nigeria? It was not in the hands of any Nigeria that by 1914, when Nigeria was amalgamated, that there was this understanding that after 100 years, we will come to reconsider our corporate existence. Now, till date, I am still searching for that document to find it out and read it for myself to know the terms of that document, which was signed as at that time by the opinion leaders and the various ethnic nationalities leaders in Nigeria. But to date, it is not in public domain. Now, that is another problem.
All right.
Just a minute. That's another problem. The point we must note here is that unless we take history very important as a nation, we will continue to rigmarole and go through one point at the same time.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. That's all time we permit us to take today. You do know that these issues are ongoing, so we do hope that sometime, someday, we should be able to come here and reiterate the importance of history as a field of study. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.